We were last still taking note regarding speech and other matters of how for everyday purposes a man does not even have to give much direct attention, immediate attention to his own personal actions in regards to whatever seems to be going on in the ordinary world. And we even made note in admission of the fact that there's been a common complaint that men are not as alert as they could be, not as conscious as they could be, and they can in fact prove it simply at any particular moment by saying, I should be more alert. And they can be, if you recall. And so as long as we were there, and that seems to be a quite, relatively speaking, sane comment to make to most of you that, yeah, you can do that, how weird. And I point out that this kind of weirdness being based upon the fact that man continues to be an open-ended nervous system process, that just because something can be done, just because it is an undeniable matter of can be, it is not an operational fait accompli that it should be. Now, it is a foregone conclusion once you understand the functions of the nervous system as it speaks. It is a foregone conclusion that people should say that whatever seems possible to be done should be done. Were it not for that, there would be no such things, well, no such popular things as guilt. Because if it apparently can be done, if any sizable number of the ordinary populace can say that something can be done, and you can even get beyond the realm of what seems to be physically possible, such as being more alert at any particular moment, you can take that which from many views would appear to be blatant insanity. But if enough people say it, that it can be done, whatever it is, that we can talk to the dead, we can take S&H green stamps out of books that have been in a closet for 10 years and use them on regular U.S. postage. If enough people say that something can be done, if life needs whatever it is, if enough people say it can be done, they do not even have to plot it. It does not take a convention. It just immediately becomes, at least tacitly, an accepted feeling in the nervous system of some large numbers of people that it should be done. That if we can think about it, then it can be done, is the way it goes. And if you can think that it can be done, and enough people think that for long enough, it becomes a matter that it should be done. But as long as we were talking about attention, and most of you seem to react in a knowing manner to that, it's just a very common one, and it is a quite real one, and it's tied to speech. That is, that people are not as alert as they could be, and that is taken as being an absolute censure of man. And I was pointing out to you that as always, the very things that the ordinary believe are condemnable and subject to reproach from another view are always a sterling example of life's health. That if in fact it be true that people could be more alert than they are now, that you're less than full alert, then you should be sorely amazed, if it doesn't hurt, over the fact that you can still operate, that humanity can operate within the midst of the complex world at partial strength. But since we had already brought up the subject of attention, I wanted to point out something a little more specific, that there are actually two kinds of attention based upon the kinds of mapping we've been doing of the primary and the secondary world, that there are the attention of the primary and the attention of the secondary. And although they would appear to be necessarily distinct from one another, when it comes to a greater operational view, they are overlapping and inseparable. Such as, of course, as always, if we do separate them, which I'm about to do verbally, and they could operate in such a manner, the primary world, whatever the attributes or characteristics we might mention, would be silent and never noted anyway. So you have to take that as a given going into it. But it would be the kinds of attention, let us say, that you were working on an assembly line, doing work, even that required some manual manipulations, some amount of physical dexterity. Assuming again that you're an ordinary, sane, walking around part of life's middle class. Primary attention, you can stand there once you get the job, and if it's fooling around with welding equipment, heavy machinery, you can stand there, and your primary attention can take care of sticking this bolt in the hole when it comes down and cuts off the end of it without ever maiming yourself. You can do that with primary attention while engage your secondary attention with talking to somebody next to you. And just almost never look over there. The way it operates, of course, literally is that the body will continue, if we speak of the body as being one of the manifestations of just the primary world, will continue to glance around and orient itself, so to speak, but not necessarily every time you stick in that bolt, a split second later comes down a great piece of machinery and chops off the end of it. It could be your finger instead of the bolt if you were not careful, but you don't really have to look at it. Your primary attention can be held to that, and your secondary attention held to talking to the guy next to you about what you're going to do this weekend. The two attentions do overlap, but there are two different kinds, and the only reason I bring it up is that there is a specific way in which you can see how the attention of the secondary functions in a way that is absolutely beyond man's attention. It's beyond his control. A practical aspect, since some of you seem to enjoy me pointing out about how you can be more alert by just thinking that you should be more alert, to look at that as being a kind of, we can be modern, peak alertness, a peak alert experience. Isn't that what they'd call it nowadays? At any rate, it is a fact that just by saying, well, I should be more alert, then for that second, you seem more alert. And since I'd drawn out the map, just noted that there are really two kinds of attention or alertness. This kind of, I should be more alert, this kind of thing that sometimes on a cruder level is exemplified by stories, dreams, movies, ideas about, if not mythical, at least metaphysical or metaphorical ninja fighters, and I am on guard not just to physically protect myself from ruffians in the street, but ruffians in my brainstem. Naughty thoughts and feelings and all that. To feel that, yes, indeed, I can be more alert, and right this second I am more alert, I was going to give you a quite physical description of what that is in light of what I just noted. It is a temporary bringing, it is bringing the primary and the secondary attention, is making them coincidental, which they, as always, is what we've been calling the secondary and primary world, cannot literally be separated. But, assuming that you caught the kind of example that you can do a job physically, and let us say, just to take my description, you're giving it your primary attention. It does not need to be vocal, and in a sense, at that level, if you're just ordinarily sane, you can see through your fingertips, is what it amounts to. It's how you can do that, or how the fry cook can stand there and lower the blanched French fries into the boiling oil, not dropping them so that they'll splatter, but he can stand there and holler at the waitress and curse out somebody, and his fingers almost can see that they can just reach right over. It's normally called, I guess, motor skill habits, but there is an attention at the primary level, and there is an attention at the secondary level. And these kinds of experiences that the history of man is replete with them under all kinds of guises, religious, philosophical, now psychological, peak conscious experiences. Older times, or in older times going on coevally right now, there are people that their nervous system is driven to attribute it to some kind of spiritual force, but the point being, all over the world, crossing all kinds of cultural, religious, etc. boundaries, is the kind of response to the declaration, especially if it's a condemnation, because everybody welcomes a little kick in the umlauts and a little guilt, is to be pointed out that you people are not as alert as you could be, and many, 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 many people, just all over the world at all times go, yeah, that's true. And so there is this awareness, whether the people, some individual will say that he's ever had a personal taste of it, but they will respond positively if you say you can be more alert. Even if you just pull the little thing I did of saying, right now, just say to yourself, I should be more alert. People, I should be more alert. And for a second, they go, wow, you know, that's true. So people respond that it is valid. The validity is, even though I repeat that it is not a functional, profitable method to try and separate the two. But do notice that you can, if you take my description, that you can physically be there operating heavy machinery, dropping French fries into 210-degree boiling corn oil, and not look, and at the same time trying to talk up the waitress. What are you doing later? And you're doing this at the same time. They do not, from any ordinary view, have to apparently be coincidental. That over here you're doing one thing. It's like your body, to put it real crude, which is actually too crude. But taking a look at some of you, maybe that's impossible. The oxymoronical society, I know, will get me for that. It's as though your body's doing one thing and your brain's doing something else. That is not, for those of you that find any sense of this, you know that's not the best description. But it is as though your primary attention is doing one thing and your secondary attention is doing another, which you should. Or else, you know, we would all be in a hell of a mess, or you would really have something to worry about, those of you that are afraid of flying, to find out, you know, that the pilot's up there flying this thing and you laying there in that great, you know, steel coffin or prop back, and he's up there only every now and then glancing at the things. He's more looking at that new steward thighs, trying to chat her up. And if you saw, well, the man ain't paying attention, or worse yet, a bus and the driver. The attention, in a sense, that kind of ordinary attention, can go in two different directions that apparently have almost no convergence. And what gives this feeling? That if it's just at a pretty temporal, ephemeral level of me saying, all right, everybody say I should be more conscious. And everybody goes, well, I try it. And I say, well, you feel anything? And you go, well, yeah, that is something. From there, it can bloom into everything from a course in how to sell real estate and write chain letters to some, you know, mystical religion. But what I'm pointing out to you is there is a very valid basis. What that is doing is taking those two attentions and running them, causing them to temporarily act coevally, coincidentally, which they do not normally do. They do not normally have to. But there is a basis for it, and it's not because that you ate some strange mushrooms or that you lit the right kind of candles to the right kinds of cosmic forces. You have literally taken two forms of attention and you have brought them into a common point. And it strikes people, all the way from everyday people that stumble upon drugs, because you can experience some of that in a kind of a non-functional manner on drugs, especially those known as the hallucinogenic is why they're known as that. People don't know why, but they just go, God, I can focus. Which was, a lot of you, I noticed last several nights ago at one of the Kairoots, about one man said that what he liked about drugs, or did he say alcohol? The same thing. He said what he liked about drugs was that it made him be able to think louder. That is, again, sort of a crude reflection of this, is on certain kinds of drugs, and at a very crude level, if we want to get into that, is alcohol. It can put you, if you were doing it through some other means, what we're calling, or what I was going ahead and I'll accept the kind of description of a kind of a peak focusing of attention at a very, very crude level is what alcohol does, but rather than calling it a peak experience of attention, it's more like a cement block version of an idée fixe. But it does seem in some way to kind of narrow your attention. Like you get mad at your wife or your husband, or the guy bumped into your car in the parking lot, and you go in and you have a beer. And then you say, well, give me another, and you have another, and then you think, hell with it, give me a shot of Jack Daniels. And it's like, you know this, you've already, more and more you get to think about it, and finally you think, when you first walked in, the guy bumped into your car, he said, God, I'm sorry. And you went, oh, those things happen. And he says, and the guy says, well, I'm sitting here at the hotel, if you change your mind, my name is, Wilson, and call me. I'm up in room 4. So you go in and you have a couple of drinks, and you look out the window and you can see the dent in your new car. And you have another drink. And so at a very crude level, this is, don't lose your place because I am not a shill for the alcohol industry, But I'm just pointing out that, again, this is why those kinds of drugs have a popularity in a way that people don't understand, because it's almost like a low level, not to brag on or not to give kudos to ordinary forms of meditation or kung fu, or people believing that they are in some way being able to centralize their attention. Well, let's say they can. It's just a crude form of that, but instead of focusing your attention, it's like I just become absolutely enraged over one thing, that the more you drink, the more you think, what room was that? And you look, and the little dent gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you begin to see him as being smaller and smaller than he was, and you begin to think, I mean, it becomes just, there's nothing to do except go up there and punch his bell and then punch his clock. But all of this has to do, again, with the fact, back to where we were, sort of the main point, is attention does not work, or some call it consciousness, but this end of the nervous system, that which we are attributing to the native of the secondary world, it does not operate, without any doubt, at full force. That doesn't mean it should be, but as always, it being an open-ended system, man's nervous system, since there is an awareness that it can be, it is then the accepted, once it's stated or once it's asked, it is the acceptance of, all right, I should be. Which there is, again, some validity in that. If you can, you should be. But insofar as we should be and we're not, and therefore I feel guilty, that's for the civilians. That's for everybody. Talk, from an expanded view, if you can see, part of talk's specific job is to help man's secondary control his primary attention. It is, if you can hear it, it is a more specific operational definition of what civilization is, what evolution is. In one word, talk. And the basis of the information, the basis of the energy behind the information has already permeated most of the Western world, most of the civilized world in all sorts of forms today. Mainly would be exemplified by Western psychology. Under all sorts of complex theories, conflicting dictums, all the way from the great continuing argument and debate over what is running man, his environment, or his heredity, how much of what we do is a result of what's happened to us, all of that. If you can see, there is a quite operational, one-word wrap-up of all of that. Speech. It is a huge tuna that will swallow every other, once you see it, if you do, minnows of psychology, sociology, theology, all the way to everyday walking around discussions of what the hell is going on around here? Why do not things progress in a more orderly manner? How come it is that every time I move to a new trailer park, I'm surrounded by those regressing? I keep trying to move up in the world, and what happens? Surrounded by Philistines, blister brains. Speech is what they're looking for, because speech being equated, if you see it, with what they normally think of as civilization, speech is the direct helpmate of man's secondary world to control the attention of the primary. That's it. That's what, at a very obvious and direct way, is what everyone from Confucius, Buddha, Muhammad, Freud, that's what they're talking about. That is what the general population of your own nervous system responds to when you read descriptions based upon a collective observation, based upon the collective wisdom. And don't forget the people upstairs. I don't know why they quit doing that in the Middle Ages, in a sense. I hate to say that we are regressing But in a sense, they had a bit more civility and concern for their fellow man. Because when they went to empty the slop jars from upstairs, it was just an accepted, if it was not a city ordinance, that they shouted out. But what happens now with the collective wisdom of humanity, with the recycling of thoughts, especially the great historical, well-accepted, historical, religious thoughts, no warning. They throw it out of the upstairs window, and I really don't want to be crude and ruin anyone's supper, but not only are you hit down there if you're ordinary, people, they raise up and they go, they in essence holler, more. It is still a quite material matter of speech being, in part, a direct, or in part its job being to directly help man's secondary attention control his primary attention. If I may refer you back to what I said, although they are necessary in a sense as observable, distinct entities, and they do operate in a different way. I mean, obviously, if you could see any of the example, which I can't believe that you would miss, but that you can drive your car and not really look, just periodically glance, you can sit in there and talk to somebody and drive your car. That there are certainly two stages of attention that I'm just calling to fit the other kinds of surveys we've been verbally doing, the primary and the secondary. You can see that there's no doubt operationally, pragmatically, those of you who believe in misusing the language and still enjoy William James's misuse, you can't misuse it if you make up your own, but we don't have time to go into that unless we are in the midst of it, even as we speak. They are distinct without any doubt, that you can do something and it's requiring some kind of attention, no matter what you are calling it, no matter what the people would call it of ordinary intelligence, that the body can do one thing and your mind can do something else. And they can be brought closer together, such as saying, I should be more attentive, and I was giving you another description of what it is like those two kinds of attention are temporarily brought together, and it strikes people in a very specific, and they feel quite real way. Can you then see, to shift it off from those kind of examples of fry cooks and assembly lines, that this kind of division, which is, of course, a sham, a spurious, and then when you're better, a specious division, because it is a continual spectrum up the nervous system. But what is observable as two different functions of, I can do this, and plus this end can do something else. Part of this total expansion, which can be seen as being almost a division of labor, that this is now part of its specific job, and it's only reflected if you talk. Part of speech's job is to help the secondary world, and man's part therein, to control his primary attention, to control it. It is, if you see it in operation, it is the heart of all guilt-based religions. And the man asked me, what other kind are they? And I'm sorry, sir, we do not have time to go into that kind of foolishness. This is not Harvard School of, not transmissions, theology. At the basis of all notions of morality, simply put another way, assuming again right quick that you can take this beyond any apparent notion of criticism of society and etc. But consider that only that which is desired is forbidden. Consider what do the ordinary, what does the collective mind upstairs with their pots full, what do they condemn? What's condemned? only, I mean, the real condemnation, not just some kind of little criticism that you're making your living picking on somebody's painting. The real criticism, the serious criticism of life that people get out and march for and go to jail for and die for, it's all criticisms of the primary world. It's all criticisms of the big three S's until we add the fourth one. What do they condemn? What are parents just foaming at the mouth for right up to date today? TV and movies. Oh, our children, our youngsters, being exposed to what? And I'm going to point out the obvious one. I'm just going to quote them. The initials are S and V. But how come they don't condemn, oh, we have got to do something about these ungodly television networks, these publishers, who are obviously in legion with Yankees, if not outright demons, putting out these terrible movies, these books, and all they're about is, now what are you going to expect? All it's about is gardening and finger painting. Now, I know it sounds silly, but make up your own. Nah. The only thing that grabs the nervous system of attention of the collective man are things that are at the primary root, that is, sex and violence. Now think about it. Having nothing to do with morality, if you're that good, and the Greek chorus that keeps hiding keeps asking me, see, they're trying to make me refer to that Chi root tonight about the guy who said, why don't I go ahead and just name this? What he said that he just convinced that I already thought what it should be named. But I'm not going to mention that. At any rate, right quick, strip your mind. We're just back at another great example. If you can strip your mind at all, if you can act like that kind of what would be somewhere above street level clinical observer of human life, if you could be a real revolutionist with no agenda, if there's anything to think about right quick, you got to look quick or your old nervous system going throw it out on you and not holler any warning, and you're right back. From one view, if there would be anything in the repertoire of human behavior that you would think that there's just no way to ever criticize, would be sex. I mean, if you think about it from one view right quick, what in the world? I'm just talking about ordinary run-of-the-mill, screwing, just ordinary sex. As God in the Baptist church intended, or whoever. But if you think from one view, what in the world? How in the world? What idiot? What person insane? What somebody that had slop jars, just overflowing upstairs and not enough windows to get rid of them? What in the nervous system of humanity ever came up with an attack on sex? Now, of course, there is a reason, quite valid reason at the ordinary level of the progression of humanity why it is. But the wrong reason I bring it up again is for you to see that it is only that at the primary level that is condemned. Anything else becomes criticism. Everything else becomes a form of the secondary world having to be reborn every day. That in the 1950s, rockabilly was almost the heart of rock and roll. And nowadays, if you tried to whip that on somebody, they go, hey, Jesus, give me a break. That the secondary world has to continually die and reinvent itself. And so it is always open to condemnation, validly so, to say, well, Jesus, if I see any more post-impressionist art, I'm going to gag. Well, it's a sign that you are with it. It's a sign that you're a good, up-to-date person. But it has no basic validity. You're not going to have people out storming in the streets and mothers marching against post-impressionism. Now, they take it seriously at that level as much as they take any hobby seriously. It is only, and that's just criticism, there's only condemnation when you get to the primary level. The primary level is in part, once you see it, being held in check by speech, not by morality. Of course, it's all connected. Not by religion, not by a man's conscience, because a man who can't talk has no conscience. It is part of speech's job. It is operating at the behest and in conjunction with the secondary world to control the attention, not the behavior. You don't have to control behavior. That's the old joke. You know, what is it to be a Baptist? Does it keep you from, you know, screwing other women and getting drunk? No, it keeps you from enjoying it. Because it's not a matter of stopping behavior. It's a matter of affecting talk. It is the secondary world apparently controlling the primary world. But it doesn't have to change behavior. It's why you can still be a good blank, Christian or whatever. Not by behaving as they say, but by admitting, well, no, I haven't done it. But your talk reflects, well, you know, I keep coming back. You know, please forgive me, I'll do better. That is the secondary world still controlling the primary. Not just because it cannot do what it says. Well, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm really going to try, but I can't. Or overeating, or having extramarital sex. I'm going to try to, but I can't seem to. As long as you say that, you're succeeding. They won't throw you out of any church. They won't throw you out of anywhere. They won't even throw you out of an upstairs window. Because you are succeeding. It is speech reflecting a still extant kind of control over the primary world. That's it. Let everybody turn out.